Are you struggling with what metrics you should be focused on, or is it even relevant? Today, I want to walk through how you can decide on your own KPIs, because there's a plethora of digital metrics. It's really hard to decide just where to put your focus. So we're going to look at how to pick a healthy spread when deciding on your own KPIs. Driving marketing growth can be mysterious. I don't know it all, but I'm exploring to connect the data, inform decisions, and get results. Grow your marketing strategy and how you lead. Get data driven with Scott. So, some metrics are going to give you an immediate indication of what you're hoping to change, and some metrics simply will not. It's important to really monitor not only where you expect to see the change, but also keep an eye on the larger business goals to make sure you're not sabotaging something down the line. So here's an example I see play out far too often. It's called, or what I like to call, the Michael Scott promise. So imagine Michael works for a company that hires space for large auditoriums. And so it's not cheap, and it really only suits those events that can draw a big enough crowd or a large enough ticket price to pay for the cost of the venue. Now, Michael, he wants to improve his ads performance, so advertising this venue. And after a bit of research and brainstorming, he's just decided that including the words free tour into the pitch is a good test. So first off, top marks, Michael, for deciding to run a test. Now, Michael decides to make the ad click-through rate the determining factor for success for his test. And guess what? It is a blinding success. So everyone wants it. Michael, you look like the digital ninja. You nailed it. Michael goes on to tout his win far and wide, even dancing on office desks and, doing multiple celebrations. So at this point, going to take a pause. What can you think could possibly be missing in this story? Tick tock, tick tock. Okay. So now not even a week has gone by, and Michael hears secondhand grumblings from the sales team that they're getting all sorts of people that they just can't sell to. But they all want the free stuff. So from uni students to a guy named Murray, the manager of New Zealand's third most popular comedy folk duo, this is certainly not the target market of Michael's business. Furthermore, Michael's company can't afford the time to offer anything for free to someone who's never going to be a paying customer. Now, it's not that using the words free in the ads was necessarily a bad thing, but rather it's the over-promising and setting up poor expectations. The fact that Michael had a hypothesis and he tested it, and he saw the results where he expected it, that's actually really great. But ultimately, he was just pushing the conversion fallout further down the funnel. Now, how can we avoid the same mistake that Michael made in this example? For one, he could have been a lot more regular contact with sales, but also if he decided to monitor not just the immediate metric, so the ad conversion rate, but rather the metrics he hoped to affect a little further down, like, the sales qualification success rate or something to that effect. He might have got a bit of an earlier heads up that something was amiss. So the key takeaway here is you've got to keep an eye on the big picture to make sure you're not sabotaging those larger business goals. All right, so I want to talk for a moment about layers of influence here. Now, when it comes to setting your own KPIs, you want to find a mix of measurements. So some of your KPIs should really direct that direct influence layer, what you have direct control over. But some are likely to have more of a shared influence. So yeah, you've got part to play in that, but there's other people or other influences, external market effects at play. And then ultimately, you need some metrics that really reflect the ultimate business goals of the organization. And they're what I like to call like your indirect influence. So I'll use this example of someone say, who manages a Google Ads account, right? So they're managing the paid search advertising. Their direct influence layer is likely to be that cost per click and the traffic coming through to the site. They've got a lot of control over those factors. In the second layer down, we can look at shared influence in terms of like, okay, the traffic's going to a page and maybe you don't have full control over that experience on the page, but you've got some. And so the cost per lead at this point from paid traffic will be a really good example of a shared influence metric. Now, I found in the past that split testing ideas at this level is a really great way to get cross-team collaboration, and definitely going to dive into more around split testing in future episodes. So we've covered the first, direct influence, shared influence, and now the third layer, indirect influence. So in this scenario, it could be something like the cost per deal or cost per sale. Could be an LTV to CAC measurement, lifetime value to cost of acquisition, or it could be a CAC payback, cost of acquisition, customer acquisition cost rather. And it's usually many, many more factors at play when you get to these larger business KPIs. But that's a good thing. We want to keep an eye on the larger business goal. Now, I find that these layers of influence often, but not always, reflect the frequency with which you want to monitor those KPIs as well. So when you're considering your KPI targets, just make sure you think of this: direct influence, shared influence, and indirect influence buckets. And just remember, each member of your team is likely going to have their own KPIs and own areas of influence that they really should be setting for themselves. And then some that are more shared team goals. So paid search, someone might be looking after the click-through rate, but in a more team-oriented goal, it's maybe the cost per lead. So if you haven't defined your KPIs yet, then that's perfectly fine. Today is a great time to start thinking about what those should be. So here's 3 takeaway questions to ask yourself or your team. So number 1, what are your ideal KPIs? Even if you just write them down, that is a great start, even if you don't have a way to measure them yet. Secondly, do you have some that reflect your direct influence, showing immediate results, and some in the shared influence bucket and some in the indirect influence bucket? Have a think about those things. If you're missing any of those categories, it's really good to fill in those gaps. And then thirdly, if you have defined your KPIs and you've got data, what do you see? And can you start to influence change? If you don't have the data yet, start to think about ways that you can start to capture that. So really, that's it for today. Wanted to leave you that quick snapshot on these layers, which I've seen huge success with, setting up this on both an individual within a team and also team level goals, really, that can help drive focus and direction. All right, thanks.